I'm Joe from As the Joe Flies.
And I'm Leslie from Trips with Tykes.
Welcome back to Disney Deciphered. Leslie and I have not touched a podcast, at least this podcast, for 3.5 weeks now. I've had a nice vacation. I was doing a lot of traveling, and so we're coming right back with the trip report. We'll be back with the Magic Kingdom Genie Plus strategies after this one, but we thought we'd take a little bit of a break because I recently went to Disneyland via New Zealand and Australia, Leslie. So I took a trip to New Zealand and Australia for the Women's World Cup, and on the way back came through LA and spent a few days there and went to Disneyland. So if you're interested in the South Pacific portion of the trip, you can check that out on the Mouse Memories podcast. I talked about that all there and didn't talk about Disney at all. So we're going to talk about Disneyland today. Before we get to Disneyland, Leslie, actually, before we get to what I was going to get to, why don't we start by thanking some patrons who have signed up recently since we have not been in town for like a month.
Yes, we have a couple of new Patreon supporters. Thanks so much to Neglected Neopet and to Jeffrey C. If you're interested in supporting the podcast, getting bonus content like our trip reports and our unfiltered episodes, you can go to patreon.com/Disney Deciphered, and we really appreciate everybody's support. Gonna probably have some interesting bonus content coming up. My son today, as we're recording, is in Universal Studios Hollywood and Super Nintendo Land, so I think I'm gonna put that out as a little bonus coming out soon.
Oh, nice. Without you, that's sad. Yeah, and when I was in Disneyland, of course, we do bonus content when we're in the parks with daily trip reports, and like I'd almost forgotten that I was going to Disneyland, so it was like a surprise trip report to me. But we had a lot of fun there. Before we get to Disneyland itself, Leslie, I did want to tell you about my cruise ship obsessed son, which we can thank Disney Cruise Line for that a little bit. When we got to LA, insisted on going to see the Queen Mary. Do you know what that is?
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I love that he loves all forms of transportation, but cruise ships like probably weren't on my bingo card. Like I didn't know that counted too for him.
I guess so. So now I was like, oh, how am I gonna we're gonna drive down to Anaheim and like go back. I know Long Beach isn't that far away. That's where the Queen Mary is. For those of you who don't know, the Queen Mary. Actually, you're gonna have to ask my son about that because I'm not the expert. But it was like a bit of a logistical question for me. But my parents came to both to Australia, which where our relatives are, but also to LA with us. And we flew into the airport at the same time on different flights. And then I was like, hey, Dad, you like transportation, don't you? Don't you and Mom want to take your grandson to go see the Queen Mary? So I was a little disappointed not to go, but it was going to be too crazy. We don't have time to get into it here, but Leslie, dealing with the jet lag did make Disneyland a little bit interesting. Actually, it'll come up a little bit, but they got to see the Queen Mary, and just to prove that, LA is not only about Disneyland for us, he got to check that out, and he was really excited. We got some cool pictures of him in the engine room and stuff like that, and it's only like $20 or something for an hour tour, and he seemed to think it was worth it. If you have any kid who is obsessed with transportation like mine, maybe check that out.
Good to know about. He's ahead of me. I have never been, but I was on a cruise ship of my own at the time while you were at Disneyland. I was cheating on Disney and went aboard Celebrity to Alaska. So I guess we'll have blog posts on that to come.
Yeah, I'm waiting for your kids to be in school so you can finally write that post. So look
I'll
for
get there.
That sometime before Labor Day, hopefully. Cross your fingers, folks. Tripswithtykes.com. The other funny thing, Leslie, is they operate it as a hotel now, and he's like, can we stay there next time? And I was like, oh gosh, so which brings us to Disneyland. I stayed at the Grand Californian. I wonder how much more it would cost to stay at the Queen Mary, or I bet you it's pretty expensive, but I thought no time to do a full trip report, but I think to hit some of the highlights of our trip, I thought it would be good to take a look at kind of different decisions that you make when you're doing a Disney trip and my experience with those decisions. So we'll start with staying on-site or off-site at Disneyland. Off-site was not too bad. So we stayed at the Grand Californian, but my parents stayed at the Fairfield, which is, right. I Google mapped it. It was a half-mile walk to the ticket booths, which mattered because my mom's getting older. She's not as mobile. And, actually a funny thing I realized about Disneyland is that if you're not walking, it actually is a little bit more annoying to be off site because or on site actually, frankly, because since Disneyland is so much more walkable, like if you are mobility impaired or like my mother just can't put that many miles on, it makes a difference because if you're half a mile away, you're going to walk most likely. But if you don't walk, you're going to take a 0.25 mile Uber and then walk another 0.25 miles. So I actually walked over to their hotel to pick up my son after the whole Queen Mary thing. And I will say that, the hotels are nice. The offsite hotels, they're just like, you can have, it ranges the gamut from a Westin to, you have nicer hotels to not as nice hotels. And the walking distance did make things really convenient. My parents said that it wasn't too bad for them to walk to meet us in the park. So I think that's a definite plus. And it's obviously you're going to save a ton of money by being offsite. One thing I did notice visiting the offsite hotels though, Leslie, is there's something about like, as soon as you leave, like the Disney bubble is popped. And I was like, man, Anaheim is dirty, which is not very fair to Anaheim because all cities are kind of dirty. But I was like, this is not like all of a sudden, like even the garbage cans, like as soon as I exited Disney property were like overflowing. And like we ate at the McDonald's next to my parents' Fairfield. And like, it was kind of a mess, a little bit of a mess in there and stuff like that. And so, that's just something to bear in mind. I think still saving like hundreds of dollars a night will probably, tip the scales. But there was something nice about being on site. So even though offsite was so close, it did feel different going out there into the real world.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I think a lot of folks who live in California would tell you it's gotten worse in the last couple of years. I mean, since the pandemic and with it being closed for so long and abandoned for so long, it's rougher than it used to be. It's still not what I would consider rough, but you see the cracks a little bit more than maybe you did in 2018 or something like that. I mean, it always was a lower budget, right? It always felt like you were going to these motel style properties across the street, but they're still like fun and themed. And, I do love the Fairfield. That's the hotel that I would say that I have stayed in the most of all of the off-property hotels over the course of my Disneyland, 2-decade career, or whatever it is. That's kind of our go-to, just because of the proximity and the combination of the the basic amenities that you need and none of the frills that you necessarily don't if you're not going to be in your hotel very much. So I think you had a great pick there. I don't think all of them will be necessarily quite as great, but the right combination of like price and location there.
Yeah, the other nice thing about being off-site is there are a lot of food options. If you don't want to spend as much money, like McDonald's, obviously, my dad was like super excited to eat at Tony Roma's. I was like, okay, man, Tony Roma's hasn't been good since the 90s, but that's okay, Dad. You do you. And so there's lots of options. Now, flipping to being on-site at the Grand Californian, obviously there's a lot of Disney food options, but I will say that really the nicest thing about being the Grand Californian, besides having the Disney level of service and the Disney level of room quality and stuff like that, is having that direct access to California Adventure. And I was thinking about it, and Disneyland Hotel is at the end of downtown Disney, so it's about a 5-10 minute walk depending how fast you're walking to get to the gates. But then for the Grand Californian, it's like direct entry into California Adventure, and that really actually affected our touring. I ended up making our park reservations for California Adventure every single day. And so it's really nice to just walk into California Adventure first. I'll talk about why that didn't really matter in a little bit, but really enjoyed that convenience. I would say that as a hotel, I probably preferred the Disneyland Hotel for the stay, but it's tough to beat that direct entrance into California Adventure. Although it does hurt when California Adventure closes at 10 p.m. If you want to close down Disneyland at midnight, you have to walk all the way around to get back in. We did not close down Disneyland at midnight for that very reason.
Yeah, I mean, technically, you're really not walking any farther, Joe, if you're leaving Disneyland.
That's not what Google Maps said.
It's not true. I mean, it depends on where your room is in the Grand Californian. I guess if your room is right near that entrance into DCA, then yes, maybe the walk is a little bit farther if you have to go through downtown Disney instead. But if you're on like the far wing, which I sometimes am, like at the very far end on the other side, 6 1/2 dozen.
Well, that's good to know. I didn't want to like risk it. I just went by what Google Maps said when, California Adventure was closed and stuff like that. I didn't want to risk it because at times it was just me and the three kids. So again, staying on site, it's a lot more expensive. I think it's nice to splurge at least once for Disneyland, but you could definitely get away with saving money by staying off site and walking. Now, the next decision that we had to make, it was kind of made for us, Leslie, and that was deciding whether to rope drop either Disneyland or California Adventure or to not rope drop it. Now, you typically tend to rope drop, so do you want to explain your reasoning for, why you like all the benefits of rope dropping at Disneyland?
Sure. So Disneyland has a lot of attractions that aren't available as Genie on Genie Plus. So if you want to sort of hit them with shorter waits, the best time to do that often is at rope drop. Of course, like Disney World, you've got the early entry, 30 minutes into either park, but because it's only available to guests of 3 hotels, it doesn't get busy. There still is like a meaningful rope drop for people who are staying off property as well. Lines are still really short, basically for everything except for Peter Pan. That's like the only ride that gets too long for regular guests. So I'm a big believer in just sort of hitting those non Genie Plus attractions. A lot of the little things in Fantasyland, or getting an extra ride in on some of the headliners that maybe I'll do later in the day a second time with Genie Plus. So I really like to do that. So, including Fantasyland, Pirates, and Jungle Cruise. So those are all kind of like my morning lineup when I'm going into Disneyland Park. Not as essential for DCA. So I want to hear, I know you couldn't do rope drop because jet lag and late arrival off of an airplane, et cetera, et cetera. But how did the rope drop versus the not rope drop work out for you?
Yeah, so the original plan was, and we did this, was to go to Disneyland that whole first day. So when you come back from Australia, you leave Australia in the morning and you land in America in the morning. And so it's really hard to sleep on the plane, no matter what you're flying. And so we left at 10 a.m. and we were supposed to arrive at like 6:45 a.m. And by the way, Leslie, customs so easy these days with global entry. They like, I don't know, they've memorized my face. It's kind of scary, but was through customs in like 2 minutes, which neither here nor there. But the original plan was to get in and actually get, we knew we weren't going to like rope drop Disneyland, but like get in by like 9 or 9:30 and get there pretty early. But there was a delay, and we ended up being more tired than we thought, and so we didn't get into the park that first day until 11:30. Now the days after that, Leslie, I messaged you. The first night in California, my kids slept, or one of my kids slept legit 15 and a half hours. She went to bed at like 9 o'clock and woke up at 12:30 p.m. So no rope drop was happening. And so after we were there at Disneyland for 3 days. And so when on the Friday she woke up at 12:30, I was like, there is no way that we're rope dropping on Saturday, no matter what. So that decision was made for us. And you know what? It ended up being okay. I think one thing about Disneyland is, and I think we were at a real advantage because of us going to Disney World. Because of that, it was like things like Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, Big Thunder Mountain, even Space Mountain, even though I know it's a little bit different. Like we weren't like dying to go on those things, but we could be much more picky about going on the attractions that we really wanted to go on. Guardians, Incredicoaster, Pirates. I really wanted to try Pirates in Disneyland, and we'll get to that in a little bit. And so because of that, not rope dropping, it wasn't too bad. We waited in a lot more standby lines than we probably would have if we hadn't rope dropped. But let's get to the next thing, Genie Plus or no Genie Plus. I know you're always a Genie Plus person, and we bought Genie Plus as well, but why don't you remind us, why you love Genie Plus so much in Disneyland, and then I'll talk about why we probably could have gone away without it.
Sure. So, I love Genie Plus at Disneyland because it's just that much more usable and hackable than the same offering at Disney World. Most of the attractions are available, return times are available in fairly close time proximity to when you're booking them, with the exception of just higher crowd periods or the headliners like the Guardians or the Space Mountain, the things like that. But pretty much a lot of other rides, Small World, you can often book in the afternoon for a return time that starts 10 minutes later. So it's really usable for getting in a lot of attractions. I did the experiment when it first was released, doing all 19 Genie Plus attractions in a single day while still having time for parades and a sit down dinner and drinks with a friend. And it was like I said, shooting fish in a barrel. But, that's for people who like doing a lot of rides, and that's not everybody, and it's not necessarily you, because a lot of those rides are duplicates of what you're used to doing at Disney World.
Right. So I will say that where not rope dropping hurt us was with Genie Plus. Like by the time, especially at California Adventure, so because we were never getting into the park before 11 a.m. and Disneyland, praise be, park hopping is at 11 a.m. I was like, we're never like, there's no reason for us to start at Disneyland if we're not going to get there by 11 a.m. anyway. It's just faster to walk through California Adventure than to go around, or at least that's what I thought. And it's 6 in one, half dozen in the other, like you said. So was doing California Adventure every single day. And so getting in at like 11:30, 12, by then California Adventure return times outside of like Incredicoaster had backed up a little bit. Like Spider-Man would be like 3 or 4 hours away. Guardians maybe 2 to 3 hours away. Soarin' was pretty close. Grizzly River Run, which is the better version of Cali River Rapids, I am now comfortable saying that it's an actual ride, unlike Cali River Rapids, which feels like just one single drop. There's a couple drops in that. That normally returned a little bit earlier, but still like backed up a little bit. But, for the most part, our Genie Plus return times were a little bit later. So that wasn't ideal. But what I really realized was I think not having Genie Plus, it only really hurts you on just the headliners, because I found that with Fantasyland, even not rope dropping, as long as we were willing to skip Peter Pan, we were able to get on pretty much everything. Like we would watch the app and it would balloon to 30 minutes sometimes, but it would drop to like 20, 15 minutes. So, we did Mr. Toad's, Snow White, all those smaller attractions, canal boats, and Casey's was like 5 minutes, like the whole time. And so we got to do like most of the, it might've been I think weekends are, we've talked about this before, that weekends are maybe less crowded, or at least less pressure on those attractions. Maybe that's the same crowds, but for example, just as an aside, Radiator Springs Racers individual lightning lane was the cheapest on Saturday. It was the most expensive on Thursday, cheaper on Friday, cheapest on Saturday. I think it's because the locals, when they go to the park on the weekends, they're not there to ride as much as, other things. I think you can definitely get away without Genie Plus, especially if you're there for, us being there for 3 days meant that we could really pick and choose which attractions we were going to if we had to go into the standby line. We even did standby for Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, Leslie, and we cheated a little bit by doing it like right after the parade, right as the parade was ending. I did not realize, by the way, that the parade started right over there by Small World and Mickey's Toontown. So I just stumbled upon that, but when I realized that's where the parade was starting, we had already planned to go on Small World. I was like, okay, let's go on Small World, and then as soon as it's over, watch some of the parade, and then as the parade's ending, book it to Toontown for Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. So, but even that, like, I never saw the wait time balloon past like 45 minutes. I definitely think it's doable without Genie Plus if you're trying to save the money, because it is a little bit more expensive at Disneyland, and of course that also gives you the option of not having Genie Plus for every single day.
Yeah, I mean, I do think. Did you check the touring plans crowd calendar, like how bad the days were when you were there? Because it does sound like a little bit of a low crowd.
I didn't, and
Crowd.
it felt good. Yeah, it felt good.
Yeah, that sounds like when I hear 20 minutes for Toad in the middle of the day, I'm like, I don't think crowds were as high as they usually are. So you probably got a little bit lucky with a lot of California schools do start earlier in August, so you probably lost a little bit of the local or the semi-local crowd when you were there.
Yeah, actually, my LA friend was starting that Monday and he couldn't meet us because he was doing back to school stuff. So I wonder if like that had an effect, the weekend right before school is like when the people are doing like the least fun things. So that might be it. And obviously that's just my experience. I do still think that if you're going to, the max ticket you can buy is like 5 days, with 5 days at Disneyland, I think you can really, you don't need Genie Plus for every single day.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, for a longer vacation, you don't need it. But I am often taking 1 and 2 and at most 3-day vacations for Disneyland. So I'm always the sucker who buys it.
All right, so let's move on to kind of the next decision that you're making when you're going to Disneyland, and that was debating between table service and quick service. So we did two table service restaurants, Storytellers and Blue Bayou. Storytellers is a character breakfast. Blue Bayou is the restaurant a la San Angel in the Mexico Pavilion at Epcot, where you're eating kind of under the stars, but it's connected to the Pirates attraction. And we did two quick services. Actually, no, we only did one. We ended up doing Pim's Test Kitchen twice. And I will say, I feel the same way about table service and quick service as I feel about Walt Disney World, in that one table service per day is probably plenty, and plenty on the wallet. And it's easy enough to eat quick service elsewhere. And I found, Leslie, that there were less restaurants that I was interested in. It was like really only Blue Bayou that I really wanted to go to at Disneyland. I'm not sure if there are restaurants that I'm missing or not thinking of.
No, I mean, I think that's fair. There are not a lot of table service restaurants at Disneyland overall, and a lot of them are, in the hotels. So if you don't want to leave a park, that's not really on the table. There just aren't as many, and as a result, you kind of do, if this is your second trip in the past year, you kind of start to hit them all, and then you're looking at repeating them. And so as a result, I don't do table service every trip, just because it doesn't seem worth it. But, the character meals are pretty solid. Storytellers is great. They've got Goofy's Kitchen in the Disneyland Hotel. So those are some possibilities outside the parks. What do you think of your Storytellers experience?
Yeah, I thought it was really good. Chip and Dale, once again, heroes. So, they're just really funny. I don't know, maybe they just hire great cast members to great friends of Chip and Dale to play them. But they both came over, like messed with my kids' Fruit Loop boxes. Dale even used it as deodorant, which I talked about on the Patreon trip report, which it just totally cracked my kids up. And so had a really good time interacting with all the characters. And, probably the best thing was, so my mom was cutting through California Adventure to get to our hotel, because again, the one night, so my parents only came to us to the parks for one day. So there was one day where it was just our family of five. And then there was one day where my wife left. She went to San Francisco for a wedding, and it was myself, the three kids, and my two parents. And then the last day was just me and the three kids. Well, the day that my parents were there, they were cutting through California Adventure to come meet us at Grand Californian, because the kids were still asleep at 10:30 or whatever. So my dad went on Soarin' by himself, on the way through. And then my mom came through, and she texted us, and she was like, "There's no line for Pluto. Should I line up?" And I was like, "Yeah, you should line up." But by then she had already gone. Well, at Storytellers, I made Pluto come back. I was like, this young lady really wants to take a picture with you, Pluto. So he came back, took a picture with my mom. It was an awesome interaction. We got some of the kids in it. And she really, I don't know, got a real kick out of Pluto. I think she wasn't, or either her or my dad was like, "Is that Pluto or Goofy?" And I was like, trying not to disown them at the moment. But, it's really great getting those character pictures, especially those multi-generational ones, especially when my parents were really into it. So we really enjoyed Storytellers. The food was pretty good. Outside of the hash browns, were not, whenever my kids see the word hash browns, they expect fried patties, not shredded potatoes that are fried. So they were a little disappointed by that. But other than that, it was pretty good. And Blue Bayou was excellent food as well.
I'm glad to hear it, because Blue Bayou has been kind of up and down. Yeah, I mean, the food's never been top notch, but it was down a little bit post COVID. So maybe it's on the upswing now. Fingers crossed.
Well, I got the Monte Cristo, which I think is the same exact Monte Cristo as Cafe Orleans.
It is.
And so when you deep fry a sandwich, that is going to be what it is. And then the kids all got little steaks, and those were good for the kids. So we didn't try any of the fancier things. Oh, I got the gumbo as well, which was fine. It's not
You can't mess up gumbo.
But
Well, yeah.
So
It's always tasty. Yeah.
It's like the equivalent of Americanized Chinese food, except for Americanized American food. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
It wasn't authentic gumbo, but it tasted fine.
Theme park
Good
version
eating.
of
Yes.
gumbo. No,
Yes.
it does the job. And the kid steaks, actually, that is a great value. In fact, the last time were there with our kids, my daughter, she's now 14. She was probably like 12 at the time. And they let her order, she ordered a kid's meal. She ordered the kid's steak, but it wasn't enough food for a 12-year-old. So she ordered a second one. And ordering two kids' meal steaks ended up being cheaper than ordering the steak off the adult menu. So
I mean, it's only
total
that'd
awesome
only
hack.
be $24. Yeah, that'd only be
Yeah.
$24. I think the adult one's like $50. So you could order four, four kids steaks, and
It
think of all
works.
this. Think of all the sides you can get. Although they don't have fries at Blue Bayou, much to the kids' chagrin. But yeah, so that went well. We really enjoyed Pim's Test Kitchen. I showed Leslie something that she hadn't seen from Disneyland before, which is that they have miniaturized, shrunk down forks and spoons for the kids' meals. So that was pretty cool. Of course, my kids made me wash them and take them home. I took them on the plane in my cargo pants. I hope these are actually plastic because I'm walking through airline security with this in my cargo shorts. But yeah, Pim's was a lot of fun. We were not planning to eat at Pim's twice. And then my daughter, who is allergic to milk, requested to go back to have their, they have a plant-based pasta where the whole meal is milk-free. Once again, Disney does a great job with allergies everywhere in Disneyland. We weren't worried about it. And she requested to go back, so we had to go back. And that was totally fine. And, good to go there twice. And with mobile order, it was really easy. And it was pretty quiet at night as well.
Yeah, that's one of the best quick service restaurants, I think, at Disneyland right now. I end up there more often than probably a lot of other places, and it's well located. It's easy to pop in and out. And now that the hullabaloo or whatever the word is about Avengers Campus has died down, it's actually one that you can go to and use and not have to do what you did in the first few months, which was make a mobile order reservation hours and hours in advance. So definitely, if you haven't been back more recent months, it's a usable quick service restaurant now.
Yeah, and so that'll bring me to kind of the last decision that we had to make, and that was, and this again, the decision was made for us, but you always have to decide between whether you're going to follow the wait times, follow your Genie Plus reservations, or just go geographically. And then, like I said, my mom and of course my 5-year-old, similar physical limitations. This is actually, my oldest daughter was like, is this the first time we haven't had a stroller for anyone? And yeah, it was the first Disney trip, much easier in Disneyland than Disney World, that we didn't have a stroller. And so because, the day that we were with my mom and then the day, every day with my 5-year-old, there was only so much we could walk. And so because of that, I decided because, I was doing all the touring planning, that we weren't going to cut back and forth. And it actually worked out really well. So, I think it's easiest to go through an example of what I did the day that I was with my parents. So we kind of went in through California Adventure, started at Soarin', which is right next to the Grand Cal entrance, then went to Monsters, Inc., which I'll have a little tip about that I learned for a Disney Do or Don't. And then after that, since we had done most of California Adventure that day, we went back to Disneyland, or we went to Disneyland for the first time. And so that's when we went to Fantasyland. And, actually the other nice thing about Fantasyland is I knew that my youngest daughter, she was not, even the tamed down version of Snow White, she wasn't going to be having it. So what we did as a family was actually my dad and myself and the two older kids, we went to Fantasyland first, knocked out Mr. Toad's, Snow White, while my mom and my youngest stayed to do the Disney Junior dance party at California Adventure. They enjoyed that. Then they met us at Fantasyland. And then we kind of as a group split up and went to the different Fantasyland rides depending on what people wanted to do. So people went on the carousel a couple of times. We did Casey Jr., like I said. We did the various attractions. We knew we weren't going to do Peter Pan, so we didn't have to worry about that 40-minute wait time or whatever. And I really like that Fantasyland hub area, Leslie. It's just so much more compact than Disney World that you can do that. We just had a meeting point at the carousel, and then we just split up for an hour, and then we just met back there. And it was great because, with 3 adults and 3 kids, we could go to whatever we wanted to.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the footprint of Disneyland is tighter, and that can be a pain when the crowds are really high. But it's really convenient when you're, yeah, wanting to split up and meet back up. And I sort of view the park in my own mind. Like I will traipse back and forth between like Fantasyland and Tomorrowland, not thinking about it. They're not that far away, right? Or I'll even cross over into, the first part of Frontierland or Adventureland, going as far I was say as Pirates, and then I sort of treat the back sections of each park as ones that I need to like tackle purposefully at one time. So that's Galaxy's Edge and, Critter Country. Those are far enough back in the park that I'm not going to crisscross for those sections. And the same for DCA, Pixar Pier is too far to crisscross. Like when you're going to Pixar Pier, you're going to do several rides at one time, and Pixar Pier, and then you're coming back into the rest of the park. But, other than that, like I'll crisscross, a lot. And I feel like you don't have, you get in a lot of steps at Disneyland, but it's doable, certainly for your two oldest. With a 5-year-old, it's a little bit different, but you're getting there, and you do have to sort of think about geography a little bit, but not in terms of just land by land. You can go between several of the lands in some of the parks.
Yeah, I'll get the final distance count when we're done, but it's exactly what you said. So because of my mom, it was more my mom than my daughter. I was like, we're not going to go to Star Wars Galaxy's Edge with my parents. We're not going to go all the way down there. What we did was after Fantasyland, that's when we went to Small World. And then, like I said, we went to Small World, worked out perfectly, watched the parade from Small World. Didn't have the best view, but good enough. Like, I realized more and more that if you don't need to take pictures, like, there are plenty of great places to watch parades at any of the Disney parks. As long as you just need to see it and you're not like trying to take video or whatever, it's really like doable. So, we caught the second half of the parade from right outside the Small World gift shop, which funny that Small World has a gift shop, but that's where we caught it from. And then went straight to Toontown, Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, did that, sent my mom back with my youngest daughter and my dad. They went back to the hotel to get ready to swim while my kids swung by the Matterhorn. Leslie, I didn't try to duck this, only was able to get two Genie Plus reservations for it. Okay, I did duck it, but I had to use the other Genie Plus reservations for other things. Went back to the hotel to swim, and then that's when, like you said, Pixar Pier is a little deeper. We spent the evening in California Adventure, did web slingers as a family of 6. That was pretty funny. Bringing grandparents onto web slingers. They turns out just randomly flinging your arms is as good as trying. I'll just say that. And so we did web slingers as a family, which I was really glad to get my parents on. And then the kids did like Incredicoaster, and it actually worked out really perfectly because we got to watch World of Color 1 right after the park closed. They had a second showing at 10:15, and the kids really enjoyed that. I thought it was good, too long, but not my favorite show, but I thought it's still worth watching at least once. So a really great day. At the end of the day, my mom, and then the other thing is I had to get my mom, like I was like, they can't come back to our hotel before they go back to their hotel because I want them to be able to cut through California Adventure to get back. So including the 1 mile round trip ish walk from Fairfield Inn, she did 7.9 miles on the day. So not too bad. And she texted me after, she was like, that's more miles than I've done in a long time. She's been having like some leg problems, and she's like, but my leg's okay. So that worked out pretty great. So she's like, it's amazing, like Disneyland is so much better than Disney World when it comes to walking and things like that.
Good. I'm glad it was a success. Sounds like it was a great vacation. And why don't we close this out, Joe, with our traditional Disney do or don't?
Yes. So my Disney do is something that I learned by experience. Turned out Leslie knew the whole time, but was holding out on me. The day that it was just me and the 3 kids, the 2 older kids wanted to go on Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout. Oh, I think I told you this, Leslie, but all 5 of us, my immediate family, went on Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout. The 5-year-old screamed throughout the whole entire thing, like screamed, like crying. It's like, this is how you traumatize your child, screaming the whole time, with the exception of like, before we got on, she's like, oh, is Mantis on there? Somehow she knows Mantis. I think she thinks Mantis is pretty. And so she's like really into Mantis. And she's like, oh, is Mantis there? And I'm like, yeah, Mantis is there. Okay. So we're going up and down, going up and down. She's screaming the whole entire time. Right before like the last drop, that's when Mantis comes to pick you up. And so screaming, 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 stop. Oh, there's Mantis. Drop again, screaming again. So she like stopped screaming for like a split second to point out Mantis. But completely traumatized by the attraction. So the two older kids went by themselves and it was just me. So like there was no one who could wait for them. So I took my youngest to go do the Monsters Inc. dark ride because she really liked that one. And we were waiting in the standby line and we were waiting for like 25 minutes. And like at that point I was like, okay, we can't wait any longer. Went to go back and get the kids. Leaving the queue, a cast member was like, if it's just you two, when you come back, ask for a buddy pass. And so this is my Disney do, or don't. Don't ever wait in the Monsters Inc. standby line because you can get this buddy pass. Leslie, since you knew about it and I've been talking for a while, why don't you describe what the buddy pass is at Monsters Inc.?
It's basically a single rider line, but it's for up to two people for that attraction because of how the seating works on the ride vehicles there. And I'm sorry you didn't know about it. I mean, I never have a reason to use it because I'm either getting Genie
Who would
Plus.
really? Who would?
Right. I mean, I didn't know. I knew you were going to be with three kids. I was like, what good is a buddy cast for that? But it was good for doing it with one of the three kids. So yeah, but it basically is just a single rider line. And it's not always offered, if I remember right, or it's only when, it's kind of like the single rider line at Goofy Sky School. It's a little bit hit or miss as to whether it will be working. But if the line's long enough, sort of middle part of the day, you can often get it.
Yeah, and it seems like, and because I knew that cast member was still going to be there, I knew like it was going to be fine. And actually, all three kids ended up benefiting from it because since the older two are 10 and 8, they can single ride or they can buddy pass it themselves. So we all went on the attraction again. But overall, it was a really great time. Really enjoyed Disneyland. Had a lot of fun. The kids are obsessed with Incredicoaster now. I think it's time to like take them to a Six Flags or Cedar Point or something because I think those two older kids like they are ready for it. They were like so pumped to go on Incredicoaster at night. Leslie, they like thought it was like one of the greatest things that they had like ever done. And kept talking about it. And we also got to go on Radiator Springs Racers again at night, which I highly recommend. If you're going to buy the Lightning Lane for it, buy it for like later at night when the sun is set. Just can't beat Radiator Springs at nighttime. So overall, awesome trip. Thanks everyone for following along. I really enjoyed it and hope people can get out to Disneyland sometime. All right, so that will close out the Disneyland trip report. Thank you everyone for listening. Thank you, Leslie, for being my guy or girl in the chair, whatever it's going to be, because I'm always messaging Leslie while I'm there, like asking questions live. So everyone get you a Disneyland friend like Leslie. But yeah, thanks everyone for listening. And other than that, Leslie, thank you for taking the time to talk to me. And I will see you holding out and not telling any of your other friends about the Monsters Inc. Buddy Pass.
Thanks, Joe.